What's up, guys? I'm gonna go ahead and tell y'all I am sick, so we're gonna get this podcast done tonight, but I am struggling. I got some sort of chest cold, respiratory thing, and it sucks. So, but we had scheduled this, and I said I was gonna do it, and we're gonna get through it. But if I'm hacking extra tonight, you know why. There's Sunny. It's not gonna be that easy. There. First
Hey,
try.
buddy.
Hey, what's going on, man?
Not much. How you doing?
Doing well. And you?
Sounds like I'm doing better than you.
Yeah, man, I'm struggling. I'm on day two, and I swear I've had this, whatever it is. I've had it like 4 times since August, and it usually lasts about 4 or 5 days, but it's just all chest congestion. It's
Yeah,
bad.
it's been a tough season.
Yeah,
It hasn't been that cold, really, so I think that makes sickness spread a little more, when it's warmer.
yeah, yeah. It's been a weird one, man. I've just had a strange year this year. It's just got off to a weird start, and at this point, we just keep moving, you know.
Yep, I hear you, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, it's
So,
a pleasure and an honor.
are you in Vermont?
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
Yep.
Uh,
You, most people don't know where I live, but they know close to where I live. I live right below Killington Ski Mountain,
oh, gotcha.
so like
Gotcha.
middle
Yeah,
of the
man.
state.
I've been told generally by people that know a little more than I do that Vermont and Maine generally have some of the better legal laws as far as legal states go.
Yeah, they're pretty, progressive, pretty liberal. You know, um,
Yeah, right.
a lot of Democrats in Vermont that allow certain things, and Maine was a little ahead of Vermont and Mass, but after Vermont went legal, you got Maine, Vermont, Mass, now New York, which is
Now
a
New York.
mess, but Vermont seems to be getting it done pretty well as far as product availability, pricing, and then homegrown laws are pretty decent. You know, um, I think you could up the plant count, of course, but it's not bad.
Those are generally the two things that, like, when we kind of get into the minutia of legalization, generally home grows and the provisions for home grows are one that are big. And the reason that a lot of people tend to point to Maine, and I may be wrong here, I still need to kind of clarify, but if I'm not mistaken, they have some sort of route for smaller growers to be able to get product into the legal system, which is pretty unique. Most other states have, if they have a provision for home grow at all, it usually doesn't include any way for that to be sold. And that's one of those things that going forward, yeah, I think that's got to happen. And it's something that you definitely don't see in the bigger states like Florida, New York, these
Right.
states that are entirely controlled by a couple big companies. And there's a ton of other states that kind of, it's a little easier on the low end to buy in and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get a license fairly easily and actually grow at home for retail, to bring your flower to the market. Unfortunately, the only market is the dispensaries at this point. So with the the market coming in a couple of years ago and the legalization of that, there have been people growing a little before that because that was legal ahead of that, and they issued a lot of licenses. So the dispensaries are doing well. They have more products than they know what to do with, and they have really good products. It seems like some of these smaller farms are starting to uh, have some issues getting rid of their flower because there's just enough of it around. It's hard for them to take anything on, I guess. So, but our market's just barely stabilizing. I think people were getting 3,000 a pound for the first year, and everybody was pretty happy. And I think things are starting to change there, but I'm not really. I'm just hearing from people I know. Um,
Well,
you know.
one of the things that kind of tends to happen with every legal state, and we've seen it so many times now, it's almost become cliche. When the state goes legal, there almost always a caution of how many licenses we should issue. So they tend to kind of be a little more conservative with how many they issue early on.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Usually year two, maybe they start to realize like we don't really have enough licenses. Like there's just simply not enough at that point. And so they kind of end up having to kind of issue more and more, and then they flood the market so badly. There's just product everywhere. It's so cheap, nobody can sell it.
Yeah, I think it was a little different here. I think they made the rules so easy that everybody could do it, and they didn't cap licenses that they over license.
Oh, right.
But we'll see. I mean, it's still time's gonna tell. It's still gonna take a little time. Once you get a couple more years, and then you realize how many licenses you reissue, and then new
Right. Well,
licenses
that's how they control it
interview.
long term. Right.
Right,
Right.
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 And that'll tell you if people are coming into the market or more are leaving the market. And then obviously prices and quality stabilization will,
That's the
um,
big one.
you know,
Eventually, everybody figures that out. Eventually, everybody figures out that you can't get by just growing tons of weed because everybody can grow tons of weed. It eventually comes down to marketing, quality, price.
yeah, yep. There's some really, really good growers in Vermont. Um, and their product is, it's top notch, I think. And then there's some other stuff out there that's not so good, and I don't think those guys really make it. Especially in our state, it's a little state. Everything's kind of craft here. The beer is craft. I mean, cheese is craft.
There's a
Maple
long
syrup.
there's a long history of ganja in that area too,
Yeah,
going back before legalization as well.
yeah. Vermont's got a kind of a mythical history to it with cannabis. Um, a lot of people don't realize some of it's because of the earth here, and it's when it comes to outdoor weed in Vermont. A lot of people don't realize that the soil is different here, because of the way that the mountains were formed and how old the soil is, what minerals are in the soil, and then the constant composting of the earth and the top of the soil because of, we have foliage, we have winter,
That's
it's
it.
freezing cold.
That's the winter. That's where you guys are kind of screwed though. Is all this New England states winter comes hard and it
It's
comes fast.
long, it's brutal. Spring can kind of like not even happen. It can kind of go like winter, summer, and then summer can be rainy. Last year was insane. It rained more than it is. It was the third rainiest summer ever. So outdoor was, so many people lost so much. So if that was your first year, and that's all you did was if you were outdoor, and it must have.
Probably won't be around long.
No, and you got to take those chances. I mean, it's tough around here. It gets cold quick. It can be rainy for weeks. Shit happens. You get bud rot. Septoria is a big one around here. Not so much powdery mildew, but those two can just
Really, you guys don't have a lot of problems with that? I know it's very big outdoors in like the Pacific
yeah.
Northwest, which I mean, we draw kind of a line. You guys are almost at the same parallel with some of those states.
Yep. I mean, it is an issue. I haven't had it as much as I've had the other two I just mentioned, but it seems like no matter what, every year there's a little bit of both of that. You just got to keep an eye on it. And I don't know what state are you in, or what region?
I'm originally from the East Coast. Spend a lot of time in Denver. Spend maybe 8 years in Denver. So I've kind of had the best of both extremes.
Yep.
On the East Coast, it's so wet you can't dry things naturally without sucking the moisture out. And in, Denver, it's the polar opposite.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
so dry.
2-3 days on the vine, and it's so crispy, it's beat. You
Yeah.
know, and that's been an interesting thing. I'm not really a huge, super long cure guy. I usually, by that point, I'd rather people smoke it before it gets, loses all the terps. I mean, generally. So, I've learned to master the cure in both environments. But I think that's probably the trickiest part. If you process something like hash, then none of that really matters other than your environmental controls in your grow, like post processing for solventless and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's not as
I mean,
big a deal.
if you're doing fresh frozen, doesn't really matter. A
Right.
lot of guys are doing that with outdoor too. They just cut it and put it into a truck that freezes it.
Yeah. Right.
Or on ice. Um, right now, the climate is perfect for drying. Like in my basement, it's like 55 and 55, and it's just I love curing cannabis this time of year. It always comes out really, really good.
I think that I hate to say this, and apologies if this is the cliche thing for people that live in Vermont, but as a fan, I think I would be remiss if we didn't mention the largest cannabis influenced band from Vermont. That's generally how I was first introduced to the state. Probably came up that way for the first time in like 97 or 98, chasing a
Yep.
good time.
Yep. You're talking about fish, I assume.
There's only one, man. You guys only have one that is that big, you know?
Yeah. That was fun. I grew up when that got big. I graduated high school in '95,
Oh,
so
fuck yeah. Then
I
that's
was
that's it.
young.
Like that was the
Yeah,
peak, you
I
know?
I was young when I graduated, so I was only 17 when I graduated, and the first thing I did when I got out of high school was go to the big Grateful Dead High Beat show in 1996 or 7. There was 120,000 people there or something like that. It was insane, and that was my first experience with real, tour hippie kind of that whole life. It just blew me away. Um, I've never seen anything quite like it. We slept in our car for 3 days. Bob Dylan opened up. I don't know if you remember the history of the show, but the gate was crashed. There were so
Oh,
many
that would
people there that didn't.
have had to have been like, that would have had to have been like 94, 95, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Jerry died in
I might
95.
have the year wrong, but it was bananas.
Yeah.
I mean, Google the picture, the aerial photo of the people
Yeah.
there in the stage, and it almost gives you anxiety.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And then from there, Fish. I started listening to the Fish, and that was like right after I started smoking cannabis. So I mean, I literally did my first bong hit to Hits from the Bong. I mean, that was the time. And I went to 3 or 4 of the really big outdoor fish shows. There were 3-day festivals, Great Wet, Lemon Wheel,
Yeah, we did.
uh,
I
Woodford
did.
Ball.
So I picked it up in 97 fall. And then I did most of the East Coast 98 and 99. So we did the Lemon Wheel, and then we did the
Yes, I did a lot of
Volney,
it.
the one that was at Volney Airport in New York, in upstate New York. We did that as well. Here's the funny thing that I've kind of started to, I think it's as I've gotten a little older. When I was doing tours in the late 90s, to have even referenced how much of the influence the Dead had on that culture was almost like a sacrilege. I mean, it was a little bit of like one of those things that, and I think it was a lot of that you didn't want to diminish the shine of the band and this and that. But the further I've gotten away, when we kind of see the Dead ended in 95, Fish exploded in 95, and
Wow,
it was
timing.
never the same after that.
Yeah, I mean, when Jerry died, I mean, it was like people were lost without the tour, and without some sort of music that just lets you get lost,
Right.
and like that jam band thing. Just a couple other bands, emerged at that point too. Not as much as Fish, um, but Vermont's had some pretty cool musical talent
Oh,
come
yeah,
out
absolutely. Yeah.
as of late. Mahal, Twiddle was big. I did not get into the Twiddle thing, even though it would have been super easy. I had a lot of friends around here that were pretty involved with them and their foundations and stuff like that. But um, he even Mahali's wife is from Rutland, where I live, and I know the family pretty well. They live like right around the corner, so it's kind of funny. But yeah,
I think the thing that's the most obvious to me, and it's only because it's changed so much today, was that those late 90s still had so much of that like Dead Tour aesthetic of the wooks and the shakedown and the nitrous and just everything that made tour, right? And so much of that changed when they stopped doing huge strings of shows because you couldn't really do 35 shows in a row and just bum it the whole time. Now you had to
right.
get plane tickets and hotels and
When you were literally living out of a VW bus for months,
right.
that's different. Fish didn't really do that long tours. They did their tours, and then a lot of their stuff was like at Madison Square Garden too. Like
Yeah.
big indoor stuff. So um, it's still huge around here. Um,
Imagine so, yeah. Yeah, it's only gotten bigger through the years, and I've kind of been surprised how, when they stopped playing in the early 2000s, when Trey went to rehab, it was still very much a niche, nerdy culture thing. Like it wasn't, now the whole jam band scene is very mainstream, and there's not a whole lot left of
yeah,
it that's kind of niche anymore. Like so much of it, all these bands are so big now. And once they came back, especially the last 3 or 4 years, they've been some of the biggest tours they've done. They're really reaching a younger crowd. When we go these days, there's more children than I've ever seen. Like we took our little
yeah,
one, but more toddlers and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 8 year olds, which is surprising, and it's becoming more of a family thing because so much of us are grown and older now, and we want however old our children are to be experiencing that too.
yeah. I think I'm 46. I had kids a little late. My daughter's just about 9. But I think that generation of kids and my generation of parents um, is raising um, a good type of person, like when it comes to, they're just a very caring type of people, it seems like. All her friends and stuff, and they're all into everything, like everything's awesome,
Yeah,
whether it's music or sports or no matter what it is. They're just pumped and interested in it, and I need to get my daughter to see some live music because I think she would love that.
and we So it was funny because when he was so little that we could just put him in a pack and take him with us, he saw his first show at Red Rocks at 2 months. He saw his second show, which was Oysterhead, which is Trey and Les Claypool's group,
Yep.
probably 5 or 6 months. And then we took him to fish last summer because we could do 3 nights outdoors, and he had a
Oh
blast.
wow.
We ended up sitting right next to in this little group of just parents, and it was like everybody had little kids, and so we had brought just like boxes of glow sticks and just threw them out for everybody, and the kids had a blast. And it was a good time, and it was one of those things where like we all forget that that will all end one day. Like all good things, that will end one day. And we will look back and say, I wish we could take our kids, and I wish we could do all these things, and I wish we could still have those good times. And we still can right now.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that, like the Dead, it went on until it didn't. And then, there's still iterations of the Dead and things like that, but it's not quite the same. And
Right.
that's that thing you'll always remember, that, do it while you have the chance, do it while you have the time.
Yeah. I know. I every day I get older, I wish I was born kind of in a different time. Even though I love the the 80s and 90s, I wish I was there during the 60s.
Yeah, I always
It sounded like.
said the same thing, and I think everybody, I'm only a few years younger than you, and I don't know what it was about that kind of 90s generation that we definitely looked at the 60s with this. You know what I think it was? You could get away with so much more back then. So by the time the 90s rolled around and you and I were really getting a taste of the drug culture, all of that was heavy illegal. Reagan had already done his thing and shit all over the weed and the drug game in general. And,
Right.
2000 specifically, one of the largest LSD busts in the country, which affected national supply for years. There was so many. You just look back and you go, but it was so easy for them. They just gave away acid in the streets and everybody had weed, right? Like that's the perception, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I had a lady tell me at work the other day the reason the 60s were the 60s was because the 50s sucked.
Yeah, that's true
She was like,
too.
it
That's true.
sucked.
That's true. The
We
50s were
were,
the ultimate
we were,
conservative generation. Yeah.
yeah, they wanted change. But I'm glad I grew up when I did. A lot of change though, huge amount of change. You got to think about just think about what we've done in 100 years. I mean, 100 years ago, there were no cars. There were horses and buggies, and
Yeah, right. No, absolutely.
look at pictures of New York City 100 years ago. It blows your mind to think of where we're at
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And look at where we've been, like in cannabis. Like this is why we're here.
Absolutely.
Where it's been in the last 10, 20 years.
Absolutely.
Where we're at.
And we're still just at the very beginning. Like legal weed is still such a new concept, and you got to remember, there's places where it's not a thing at all. So it's still so novel that we're still in the beginning.
Yeah, I know.
It's still the very, very beginning.
And it's weird that we complain about some stuff. We have like these luxury problems in these other states that can't even grow a plant. And we're complaining about people chasing THC at the dispo because, we want them to like turfs,
Right.
and it's like guy in Nebraska's going, whatever.
Yeah.
Mississippi.
No, and I still see that. It hits me a lot when I'm back home on the East Coast because there's less of that culture. I mean, every soccer mom has a vape pen in their purse now. So it is funny because hash culture in general is exploding. There's probably never been more people smoking hash or extracts of some sort at any point in history.
Yeah.
Just because we have so many legal grows now in the States, so many legal grows in other parts of the world. Thailand is now legal and exploding,
We
and
we don't start extracting all this stuff, we're going to be swimming in it.
well, see, that's the thing, and that's when we get back to the discussion we were having about how easy it is to produce shitloads of weed on commercial scale. Good hash will always have a premium. It doesn't matter how much is produced, it is still so tough to make great hash that it will always command a premium.
It's a total pain in the ass to make good hash. I personally can't and have not really made what I consider good hash. I mean, it's okay. I never can yield what I think is reasonable. Um, Now, moving to a different kind of method, pressing flour, that is got me. I like that. Um,
Really.
Pressing flour for rosin, live rosin, is super, super good.
And I got to be honest with you, it is probably the least interesting to me. And I don't know why. I think it really is just because the margin of error or the margin of being able to produce top quality flower rosin is so thin
Yep.
because even great strains that make great hash might not press great flower rosin. And it's one of those things that when it's done well, it's great, but there's so much bad where you have to get the heat up so high just to get something to press because of the oil
Yeah.
content or the moisture content, whatever the situation is. um, but yeah, it's one of those that every time somebody tells me they're busting out some flower rosin, I have this moment in my head where I go, oh, I hope it's good. I hope it's good.
You hope it's. Yeah, I'm fairly new to it. But what I'm finding is, like stuff that's super frosty, it's got, just loaded with trichomes. You think, oh my God, it's going to press awesome, right? Or it's going to wash awesome. And then you go and press it and it didn't press good. And then this stuff that reminds you of like what beasters look like, like no real frost on there,
Right.
just bud. I just pressed some stuff that I wouldn't even smoke. I grew it. It wasn't bad, but it's out of all my stuff, it's not the best stuff. So I'm not smoking it. But then I just decided to press it, and it pressed awesome. And I was like, holy shit! I'll press the rest of it. So
Man, it's one of those funny things too, because I tell this story all the time about the peanut butter breath batch that bit me. So I had run like a mixed pheno run of peanut butter breath, all from seed, beautiful flower, everything looked great. My everything's dialed in. Flower looked amazing. I wash it. I got like 2 grams of hash, like 3 grams of
yeah,
hash off of a couple pounds of what would have been dry material. And it was so heartbreaking
yeah,
that there was just nothing. We always joke about it in the hash making industry as the ghost batch because there's nothing you can do and the heads just don't separate. And, and it's funny because I see other people do well with that strain. And I've done well with meat breath. I've done well with a ton of other of those strains, but the peanut butter breath bit me bad. Like I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't run it again. I wouldn't touch any cross of it. I just had that bad of an
did you
experience.
do like the little test thing where you put water
No,
in and
to be fair, this was some years ago, and this was
Mhm.
before anybody was really doing jar tests heavily. Like that's another one of those things that's really popped off in the last 3 or 4, maybe 5 years.
Yep.
And when I was making hash commercially for a living, 14, 15, 16, 17, yeah, nobody was doing jar washes. I don't think I saw that until maybe 17, 18, maybe, that I first started seeing people doing like various tests and stuff like that. And I wish I had because it would have saved me. I could have trimmed it and just smoked it. The weed looked great, but it's just one of those things, man, where like when we start getting into non-solvent extractions, strain genetics is everything,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, there's who is it that just is breeding basically for that? I mean, just for washers. I forget.
I mean, that's generally one of the two things that I breed for at any point.
Yeah.
But the
Well.
truth is, from seed, it's really tough because if I give you 10 seeds, even from a cross that does really well, and I tell you like this is going to pull 6% in the wash all day long, and it doesn't, or you have one that does and one that doesn't, or there's a lot of from seed. It's really tough, and even from a good wash strain, to find that one that washes well, presses well, it's
Yeah.
tough. And it's like, that's why I'm not a fan of quoting people wash numbers, percentages, yields, as far as, strains go from seed, is because I would just be making it up, right? So if I told you I have a strain that does 6% and you run 3 or 4 or 5 and you only get 3 or 4%, well, it's not that I lied. The truth is that there's probably another 6% wash strain
Yeah.
there. But how rare are they in a pack of seeds?
Yeah. And there's a lot of variables there.
That's
you know,
the big one. Yeah, there's
you
a
know,
lot of
obviously,
variables.
there's certain people you can probably trust, know what they're doing, but um, I think it's tough. I mean, especially ice water extraction. It's
Well,
tricky.
I joke that there's a couple of cheat codes. And if you watch, I'm not going to say I've not taken advantage of the cheat codes, because I have, but there's a few strains that when I see them in somebody's lineage, just to me, I go, yeah, that you put the cheat code in there. Like, Purple Punch, Slurricane. If I see you using Slurricane, I know you're putting in the cheat code, because they're not the most amazing strains to run by themselves, but they put out such amazing hash that if you hit it to something that's really terpy, it's almost guaranteed to put out just beautiful hash plants.
Yep.
And so that's the thing, is that once we get kind of down the road and start to see more and more strains and more and more wash strains and things that we know perform well, then those are just going to become the backbone for your next generation of hybrids.
Yeah. Yeah. There are tons of people looking specifically for that. I mean, they're just asking, it doesn't wash. Or, and another question people ask all the time is, is it feminized? That's probably the number two question. Um,
Get that one a lot.
yeah, you know, um, that's a topic maybe for a different day, but and purple punch is a strain that I I don't think I really liked it when I first got it, and I don't think I was a real big fan of purple when I was younger. But now, as I get older, I find that the purple strains are better for me, especially at night when I need to, wash away the day and
Myrcene.
I need a
Myrcene.
or
Myrcene.
something.
It's all so many of those purple strains are higher in myrcene, and they might not be high THC strains,
Right.
but once you're, already in the mood and you're about to relax and you're about to sit down, they almost always work 100% of the time.
Yeah, and that there's that smell now too that and I don't know, I'm sure it's a specific terpene, but it just seems to be apparent in a lot of the purples. Like like grape. Grape is kind of in purple.
Yeah, right,
Um,
right.
commonly as
Right. I remember when the GDP and all those, the perps, when all of the kind of late 90s, early 2000s, that was a big deal, was just kind of purple grape candy, and you didn't even have to sell it. You couldn't keep it. It was one of those. The thing with Purple Punch, and it's the same situation with Slurricane, is they're not super strong profiles. By themselves, they're almost, I don't want to say they're neutral, but they're neutral enough that you can put other stuff on top of it and it's not going to interfere really. Like Slurricane, it's got kind of like a citrusy, old school funk profile, but I don't think you'd pick it out of 10 jars of dank. It's pretty,
Yep.
but it's just not the one. But when you hit other stuff to it, you can almost guarantee it's going to wash well. It's just both of those two strains, and there's others. There's been others through the years, but Tropicana cookies. You see anybody using Trop cookies? It's a cheat code. They're using a cheat code, just because it's another one that, like, genetically it passes on that wash trade, that big heads, breaks off easy, drops in the wash, doesn't have super waxy cuticles, so when you go to press it, you're not losing a ton.
Right.
There really is like it's a cheat code. I mean, and that's why so many strains going forward, so many people they find one strain that washes super well, and then it's just hit a bunch of stuff to that.
Yep. Yep. That's interesting. Um, I have one of your packs that I'm actually going to pop because of this show and because of this that has purple Doja in it. I
Double
think.
purple
Shocker.
Doja.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the first time I ever ran double purple Doja. I had gotten some seeds from somebody on Icy Mag, so this is probably 02, 03, 04 maybe. Jesus, it's 20 years ago now. And so it was the first strain that I ever saw that had purple in the heads. So it was the first one that I ever saw made purple keef, and I think the first time we all see that, it really is this like, what? Like, what am I looking at? Right.
Yes.
But like, I've seen strains where it'll fill in the stalk with anthocyanins with dye. And
Yeah.
then I've seen a very rare subset of those strains where it fills the whole trichome with that purple. That was the
I have
first one.
I have never grown a purple, well, super purple plant. Like one of my outdoor plants turned pretty dark towards the end, tectonic
That's the
purple.
one then, because that double purple doja will also turn purple. Like, it's so funny because the first couple times I ran it, when you put them into flower, you almost think something's moldy or something's funky. Like you look in the very apex and it's just dark and you're like, wait, it's week one. Like, what's going on? And you scope it and it's just turning purple, almost immediately into flower.
Yeah.
And the double purple doja is one. The Buckeye purple I worked with is another one that's just super dark, super dominant, purple, purple, purple. Yeah.
That was the blackest, darkest weed I've ever seen in my life. I got some from a friend. I got a Z of it, and I found a seed in a bag of Buckeye. And then I started doing the research on it, and I found out that the breeder, it was a female breeder who no longer bred anymore. Remind me her name if you can.
Man, I gotta be honest with you. That's one of the weird ones that I don't know. I don't know all the lineage to.
Yeah. Anyway, I got a bag seed out of that bud, and it germinated, and it wasn't even close to purple. It was the
Wow.
greenest,
Wow.
most like it was like Gorilla Glue. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
all we could come up with was it somehow pollinated from another room that was full of Gorilla Glue. Something probably burned or something. I don't know. And
Right.
there you have it. And it was like the only bag seed I had gotten past, in the years of when you didn't get seeds. You
Yeah,
know.
right.
And then I started thinking about back in the day, some of the stuff that we used to get, and all those seeds that we used to throw away. I mean, I don't know if any of them would have been really good or not, but there was a lot of them.
Yeah. Now, there was only one.
Here we are.
So I talk about this all the time. When I started growing, the only places you could get seeds were like Mark Emery in the magazine, right? Uh, Amsterdam or Canada,
Yeah.
or just pick them out of bag seeds. Like, there wasn't a ton of access that we didn't have. But at that point there was no internet. There was no. Yeah.
Somewhere in Europe or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And the only place you could order them out of was it Skunk or one of the Canada cannabis magazines had Mark Emery seeds in the front. You could order seeds from that. And I remember I was going to put in an order the day I read that he got busted. I had the order in the envelope, was going to drop it in the mail. and I saw the thing that said he got busted, and I was like, wow. And so for years, the only seeds I had access to were I made them, I got them out of some weed, or I just happened to find them. Well, there was one particular trip. I think it was the weekend I got engaged. I got engaged on a beach in Miami during a fish weekend. So they were doing New Year's Eve in Miami. This is probably '03, and we were in the lot and we got like two different really special bags of weed, and one of them was just full of huge big seeds, and I had saved them. They were in a cellophane, they were sitting on top of the desk. And when we got in the car, it was one of those, we woke up the last day, everybody's scrambling to get all our shit and get in the car and, get back home, 12-hour drive back home.
Right.
And I get in the car and I'm probably 6 hours out of town and I go, did we grab the seeds? And we didn't. And they were still, and I still to this day, if I talk about the one that got away, that's the only one for me that, like, they were huge seeds and it was some of the frostiest bud I'd ever seen at the time. And, I still to this day, like, especially the more I got into seeds, I started to think back about how many went to waste in some way or another, whether it was because I thought there'd be more, or I just, stuff that I ran back then that I just didn't have the foresight of, like, just make crosses and make, in the early days, you didn't really think of that. You were more about, let's just grow as much as we can. And so making seeds was kind of a side thing you might do in a closet or a spare area, or, you know, it wasn't until much later that I got into, like, seriously making seeds that I went, man, there was so much stuff I wish I'd have saved and put away and crossed with other stuff, and today would be so valuable in just genetic material.
Yeah, I know. I think back in the years, and I didn't really, start growing until um, 4 years ago, 3 years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
But
yeah,
I was always around
yeah,
cannabis
right.
in Vermont, and it was a plant. It was medicine to me at the time. Like when I was in high school, I was in a wheelchair, and I had a lot of pain, and it was an easy transition off of morphine and things like that, and then it kind of gave me something I was good at.
Right.
Like I started just networking, and then I liked the whole scene, and then the music scene and everything. It just kind of took off from there. But my dad was a florist. As I grew up, I
Well,
grew
that's
up in
awesome.
a flower shop, so I was always around plants, taking care of plants, and I always was like, God, I wish my dad would grow. And then I was always like, someday I'm gonna grow weed. Someday, and then um, it was 2020 when COVID hit. I was in the middle of closing on my house. And I had to stay working to close because the bank didn't want to give me a loan if I wasn't working. And everything was during the shutdown, and I was still working at the dealership, doing my move. I just closed, and everything had shut down in the town. And Vermont just became legal to grow at home. And my buddy came by, and he said, "Meet me out back in the parking lot." And I met him out back, and he said, "Open up your trunk." And I opened up my trunk, and he opened up his trunk, and he pulled out a little wedding cake plant, and he's like, "Happy home ownership," or something like that. And it was April, so it was like, okay, put it on your porch and let's see what happens. And I put it in it was about a 20-gallon blue
Oh, yeah,
tote
the
with those
big toes.
handles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
handles that you usually like put like, I don't know, sports
Bodies.
equipment in it
Those are the
and
body
whatever.
toes. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I filled it full. I can't even remember the soil. I think it was Costa Maine. Anyway, I grew a 9 or 8 foot plant. It was crazy. I didn't even top it. The thing was like Christmas tree kind of thing. And then my buddies like dried it and I actually paid somebody to dry it for
Oh,
me because
wow.
I was, you know, worried that I was going to screw that up, and then my buddy smoked it and he said it was amazing, and that was it. Ever since I got a tent and went from there. Um,
You
but
generally run, you generally
I
run
always knew I'd be something
organics?
like this. What's that?
You generally grow organics?
Yeah, I was taught to grow with coast of Maine soil, the Stonington blend, in an earth box. My good friend John, um, he he showed me the way. He'd been growing for a couple of years, and the first plant I grew was Omerta Genetics. Um, oh God, what was it? It was unbelievably frosty. I couldn't believe it, but it ended up harming because I ended up having a heater in there with a light on it. Early mistakes and rookie mistakes, and and then the other thing was I had the fan pulling in cold air onto the heater, and it was one of those hot air blowing heaters, so it ran and then it cooked my plant. So I
Out.
hermed it and then I cooked it. That was my
Out.
first indoor plant.
Yeah, I don't know how many people have gotten bit by the old orange light I forgot to cover up on the power strip, the heater, the light, the timer,
Yeah, I even forget about it now. Like every once in a while, like I was like, "Oh shit, look at that!" I put a new something in a humidifier the other day, and I was like, "Holy shit!" I didn't
Yeah,
even.
I try
I
to
just
remember these days if I do anything different to do the dark test again, just cut all the lights off and sit on the floor and just look for a spot of light anywhere. And yeah, that's one of those things that like I don't think enough people think about it because so many people are like, well, I got my grow dialed in, and then like you said, you add some new electronic and you don't really think. You're just so stoked to have your environmentals right again or stoked to have everything together again, and you just don't think to check it, and it's got a little red light or a little white, and everybody goes, well, it doesn't matter, it's not a white, it doesn't matter. It's a white light that's usually behind a red piece of plastic, which means that it's still putting out enough light that a sensitive plant could absolutely be triggered by it.
yeah. I mean, it happens. Those are things. Once you get, where we think you're good at growing and you're not, you know, thinking too much about how to grow. Your mind's thinking about all this other stuff, like what we think about is which plant's gonna work good with another plant, or what projects you have, that you haven't even done, that you're trying to think of, and those things you miss. Um, I think it's good to go over to another friend's house who's growing every once in a while and have someone come over and look at your grow too, because they can usually notice something that you're not seeing, and vice versa. You'll see something in their grow that
Yeah,
you're not doing that you can pick up as a good habit. For instance, I was at my buddy White Cloud's dance
yeah,
the other week, and he's an amazing grower, breeder guy I'm working with. He's been doing it a long time, and just something simple. He was using a pump sprayer to water his plants, and I hand water, but I'm hand watering like an animal over here, just like, pour water,
yeah,
and here he is, nice and delicate. And I go back and I'm like, why am I not doing this? I have this stuff in my house. I know the technique is better, but it's like, you know, um, I was just missing it. And it's like, those are the things,
right.
it's good to do that, I think, to refresh yourself and remind yourself of some of those little things that
Yeah.
can make a big difference, make your plants happier.
I've always been a big fan of, being around other grows, whether it's friends, whether it's other big grows, commercial grows. But I'm not going to lie, as soon as I get home, it could be my best friend. They could be the greatest grower. Man, them clothes are going in the washing machine, and I'm going butt naked in the shower, straight in. I don't care who you are. If I'm going in your grow, I'm gonna pretty much assume we were just at the same orgy together. Like I'm going straight in the shower. Like anything that you got, I now have. And, it doesn't matter. And I'm super weird about it. It's one of those things. But, like, yeah, that's just old school me. I don't
It's
wear the
okay.
same shoes. Like, I won't ever wear my shoes into my grow because if those shoes have been anywhere outdoors, if those shoes have been anywhere in another grow, that's the one place that I've seen mites travel more between grows is on people's clothing.
That's one of the hardest things to not do. I mean, when you're working out of your basement, you got, some tents in a room in your basement, and then you got a plant outside, and you're growing vegetables, and you
Right.
got house plants, and you got screen doors, and you got
Christmas
kids
trees.
running into your
Christmas
house.
trees. Christmas trees.
Yeah, Christmas trees. There's another one. You can get shit. I mean, go get a plant from Home Depot. I mean, and see what's on that. I'm always
Yep.
amazed at how good the plants look at Home Depot.
Oh yeah.
And then you get them home and they like immediately die. What? I mean, they don't have a good.
Neonicotinoid sprays. They're non-consumable, so they usually don't care what they spray on them. So they usually use neonicotinoid sprays. That's why you don't usually see pollinators around their outdoors, is because they spray all their ornamentals heavily. Yeah, it's once again, it's all sight gags. If nobody's consuming it, boy, you don't want to see what they spray on it. They'll spray anything on it. They really don't. That's been a big argument for what happened to the bees. We're running close to time,
Yep.
but that's so many of these large commercial grows, especially where they grow the stock that they get. So many of those places, because they're usually non-consumables, if we're talking about shit that's just ornamentals or pretty flowers, cactuses, stuff like that, they'll spray, the nasty shit on them because they don't really care. It's only going to be this big in their care for a little
Yeah.
while. And then once you take it home, it's your problem.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's a whole nother.
But you
Topic.
are right. That's a very astute observation that you never see, none of the problems that when you go to Lowe's or Home Depot, you don't really see mite infestations everywhere. That's because they're spraying Avid. They spray Avid. If you spray Avid, Avid's going to make sure you don't have any bugs. So most of the stuff that they get, the nurseries that they get it from, they're usually just producing ornamental. Like I have a buddy that works for one of the major companies that feeds Lowe's and Home Depot with ornamentals and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we have some funny conversations about stuff like that because he's like just a sales rep, but he knows the ins and outs of the large ag commercial industry.
Yeah.
And some of the conversations we have are really funny, especially like I said, if it's not something somebody's consuming. That's the difference. Even with edible things, vegetables and things like that, the amount of pesticides and things like that that are acceptable is much higher than it is for us as cannabis growers because we're combusting it. And that's a whole different thing. So like when we start to get into like Eagle 20, which is one of the systemic fungicides, and I'm getting off on a rant here when we're out of time, but it's one of those things that like you really, if you knew how much of it was on your food, you would probably shit. But at the same time, when you smoke it, it turns into a form of cyanide gas, which is even more dangerous, which it's horrible that you smoke it. But the wine industry, there's a huge percentage of the wine industry where myclobutanol, which is the chemical that's in Eagle 20, is very much accepted. And they accept a certain threshold amount of it in your wine because they can't deal with the powdery mildew on the grapes. They don't have it another way.
Yeah, they have to do it.
Anyway, so short, and where can people find you? Seeds, product, whatever.
Well, you can always message me through my Instagram when we're here, so that's easy. My genetics will also be listed on whitecloudsgenetics.com. That's White Clouds, my partner basically in this.
I may have him on soon. We may put a weekend together. I think I talked to him about it, and I think I did. But yeah, we'll probably get together on one.
Yeah. So there, and then I'm gonna have a lot of my seeds in local dispensaries here in Vermont. So if you're a Vermonter and you're in any of the areas where there's dispensaries, you should find my stuff eventually. I'm making kind of my rounds and whatnot.
What
So
What's the policy, real quick? What's the policy to get seeds onto a counter in Maine? Is it all closed loop? So it essentially has to come from within a metric system or something like
no,
that, closed loop system?
Vermont, there's nothing yet. They
Okay.
don't have a breeders
I
don't license yet. They're
need
talking
to get in
about,
some Vermont. I need to get some Vermont dispensaries then.
yeah, you can, they can sell seeds in grow shops and dispensaries.
Because for years in
Um,
Colorado, it had to come from within a metric tagged facility. They've just recently changed that to some degree, but it was very closed loop in the early days, and that just leads to people having to cheat. Like that just leads to we all knew ways around it. So there were ways where you could get stuff into the system that didn't have an originating metric tag. Anyway, I'm rambling again. The one place you can always find my genetics, www.terpfiend.com, TERPFI3ND.com. I'm not going to bother you guys with any more. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you coming on. We'll have to put another one together sometime. It always
George,
goes by way
it was
faster
great.
than
I can't
I
believe it
think.
went
And
by this
yeah, it
fast.
does. It goes so quick, man. But once we get chatting, then before you know it, the hour's over and it's done.
Yeah, I really appreciate you. I hope you feel better. If you ever come to Vermont, obviously look me
I'm
up.
going
And,
to. I really need to get up that way again because I have some grows in Maine that run my gear and that sell my seeds. I've
yeah,
really wanted to get up that way. Like I said, I haven't been up there since
yeah,
98 or 99 when I was on fish tour. Like we did all those, going up into the New England and all the way to the big festivals at the
yeah.
end. And yeah, but I really need to get up there, and I'd really love to just come see some grows and just hang
Yeah.
out and
Vermont and Maine
smoke up the East Coast. Man.
bringing the
Yeah,
heat, and it's obviously a beautiful area to be. So
it is. Well, thank you guys so much. Y'all have a
yeah,
good one. We'll catch you on the next one.
yeah.
Peace.